next Respect Project talk. Hi, you guys. It's been a minute since we've done a Respect Project talk, and I'm so excited to be here with this phenomenal panel of women. Let me introduce the panelists. We've got Lori Levine. I want to sidebar and just say what these women do. Lori has a celebrity marketing firm called Flying Television. Kara Pfeiffer, one of my producing partners. All these women are amazing. Actress, philanthropist, EVA LARUE, phenomenal actress, philanthropist, public speaker, Caroline Baudino, an influencer, public speaker, just a phenomenal woman. And it's so great to bring you guys together. Oftentimes these diverse conversations are not just women, but I feel like the topic of boundaries and achieving balance feels divinely feminine to me. They're topics that are just good launching pads for a good conversation, but also how do we manage to spin 12 plates on our fingertip with such grace? And you guys make it look easy. You are successful. You are deep. You're open. You're revealing. And I always invite people into these conversations and say, come and let's be honest on behalf of other people. So without further ado, I just wanted to start knocking around this topic. Caroline, I know we were talking a lot about how much our boundaries have improved since COVID. And I'm curious if that's something that you've been able to maintain, now that we're not isolated anymore. I mean, how did you improve with your boundaries? Where are they at now? And, have you made a big impact in your life in regards to having more balance?
Thank you, guys. Hi, everybody. Good morning. And I just want to say, truthfully, I think the greatest thing about COVID and the lockdown was that complete awakening of what is necessary in your life. Who serves a purpose, what serves a purpose, what actually means something to you, what actually makes you feel good and happy. And that's something that I really focused on. And for me, finding the boundaries was really cutting out all the noise. Like for me, really was taking control, taking my power back and being like, this person actually doesn't make me feel good. Even if it's a family member, I mean, literally, even if it's a family member or a friend or a mom group or whatever it was, I just realized I don't need to be in places where I'm not welcome. I don't need to, be around people that don't make me feel good, that don't make me feel seen, heard, loved, and respected. And I started to realize I started setting boundaries of what actually makes me feel good, not me as a mom, as a wife, as a daughter, taking care of everybody else, serving everyone else, and honestly always forgetting about myself and making myself sometimes uncomfortable in situations, going out of my way, helping people, doing things, for example, something like volunteering at school. There are moments where it became, like I actually didn't enjoy it and I wasn't happy around all the moms and I wasn't happy, slaving away and no one actually gives a crap what you're doing. And it was one of those things about being able to say no. That was really one of my hugest boundaries.
That's really like such a big part of why we first came up with this as a topic. Carrie Maloney and I are partners in the Respect Project. And I have to pivot over to Kara because the power of no is really where this started. But then I thought, well, that's kind of negative, but it is true. And, Kara, you and I are working on some projects where like the theme behind the movie or the film or television show, saying no and finding your voice is so essential to finding your power. But there's a lot of discomfort with that, and then if you are comfortable with it, then you're like an angry, you've got too many boundaries. So it's like, it's a happy balance.
It's interesting. I grew up in a family that had fluid boundaries. Full disclosure, I was a clinician back in the day. So I learned about all this and then diagnosed my family. So we grew up with fluid boundaries, no boundaries. I don't know. It was like everyone walked around naked when it was like, not even nowadays we'd be canceled as a family. But when I grew up, I left, I'm from Montreal. When I left to go to university at 17, I realized who I was. I realized what my limits are. And I realized that it was time to value myself and set boundaries. And interestingly enough, my family system didn't work that way, right? So if I said no, that was an aggressive act against my family. And so I was called selfish. I was called, other things that we can't discuss at this hour.
Oh, so sure. Yes, we can.
What do you mean? What else did they say?
Well, they would say that I was a see you next Tuesday, that
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that,
aggressive.
I didn't go to visit. It was very aggressive. And it became really, for me, a sense of survival to hold on to those boundaries, as difficult as it was, with my siblings and, my parents. So I learned, and it's interesting because you were talking about lockdown, right? So I have 3 sons. One of them was met a girl September before lockdown. By Christmas, he was 14, turning 15. By Christmas, I knew that they were having sex. And when March came around and we were going to go, outside of the city and hunker down, I was like, do I separate Romeo and Juliet? Does she come with us? And she came with us, and they lived as a couple for 9 months in lockdown. She's 6 months older. She was 16, and her parents were around. They live in the city. But I had girlfriends who said, "Oh, you're obviously not the mother of a daughter." And I said, well, hold on a minute. Vanessa said to me one day at breakfast, at least, even if Luca and I don't get married one day, at least I know how I deserve to be treated.
Wow.
I got that memo at 31. Okay. My
Right.
20s would have not been a shit show had I said.
And that's a really big part of it. I think, Lori, I saw Lori and Eva, especially Eva, you sent me a text this morning about trying to decipher the difference between your intuition protecting you versus being like, this blinking red sign. Lori, we were talking about this too, of like danger, but it comes from your origin story, much like what Kara's saying. And, so, you want to listen to your intuition, you want to have strong boundaries, but I think it's really beautiful what Kara said, which is, if you weren't shown how to receive love as a child, you really struggle with your boundaries, and you have a lifelong journey with them. I mean, Lori, I see you.
It resonates from, first of all, I am a stepmother of 4, 2 boys, 2 girls. We would have done the same thing. And during lockdown, all the kids came home to be here in Connecticut, and Jan and I got actually stuck in the city because they shut down the borders. You can imagine, between New York City and every other state. So here we had 4 kids between the ages of 18 and 24 living in our house alone. So, they started to really feel like what it was like to live as adults. We weren't there supervising them. And just to give you a little bit of background, I am the youngest of 5 in a blended family. My mother had 2 boys, my father had 2 girls. We came together. So I met my husband. I had already done the 100,000 hours of a blended family. I was single. And he said, oh, you spent the weekend with your kids. How many kids do you have again? 2? And he said, no, we have 4. And I said, oh, he said, is that a problem? I'm like, nah, we all have family. Because I'd done it already. I did my whole life with all of these extra siblings, and my aunts and uncles were actually the exes of my parents. I didn't know until I was like 10 years old that, Aunt Jeanette and Uncle Leo was my father's ex-wife and her new husband. Like, so
that's amazing.
And so, yes, boundaries are really hard in families, but I also grew up with it's a nutty way to grow up, right? With all of these extra people, and the influence of my father just going like, this is how it's going to be. So as I got older, I didn't really have a voice. And until he passed away, I just, it was like my spark got, pushed down. So when I got remarried and, I have these 4 kids, I had to start realizing that, what my role was, which is a little artificial inside a family unit. And now, just to throw acid on the fire, in October, I got mugged at CVS on Fairfax and 3rd, inside the store by a homeless guy. It was terrible. But when I came back and I got into trauma therapy, I learned a lot of stuff. I learned a lot about, when you can imagine with 4 kids, you get interrupted a lot. And that's really a trigger for me because I felt like I never had a voice. But in therapy, I learned you can just say, wait, you know what? I just want to say, I want you to hear this one thing. and if I speak softly and kindly, I'll get my point across, versus being like, well, I wasn't, when I was so rudely interrupted. Like, you'll never get heard that way. So I think that, that's where the triggers, and when you set up boundaries, they can really kind of, we think they're protecting us, but they're really hurting us, because we are not allowing things to happen.
I agree and disagree. And I would say that is something that, is revealed to you when you begin to have some healthy intimacy in your life, that maybe how you survive doesn't work anymore for you, but what got you through.
Well,
Maybe
I needed something. Yeah. Something
Yeah.
actually shook my entire foundation. But growing up, I felt like I was Marilyn from the Munsters, which dates me, but I felt like I was living in a house of monsters, and I was the only normal person. And if I did everything completely antithetical to what my parents taught me, I would be able to survive. And so at some point I had to, my mother only would come to me if she wanted money. And then at some point I had to just cut that off. And it's really hard to live in a world without your mother. But then I realized I was always living in a world without my mother. She was never
Correct.
really about me
That's
or
right.
anything. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, the only time I'm kind of reminded that she's around is when I have to do life insurance. And they're like, is your mother still living? I'm like, yes, but not in my life. She'll never meet my children. And, it sounds harsh, but that emotional, when you're so devoid. And I mean, I would watch television. I'd be like, why is a mom hugging her daughter? What is that? Is that normal? I didn't know.
So
I had no idea.
This is interesting because I know all of you really well. This is a unique talk. You're all incredibly successful. You're so strong, and you've managed to create very strong boundaries for yourself, being sort of love starved in childhood in many, many ways. And then now finding a better chapter in your life with intimacy. That balance of having boundaries, even like some of you are married, some not, but finding healthy, positive boundaries, maintaining them after having had boundaries that are so like, don't fuck with me, and so that leads to the other topic of the conversation today, which is balance, because I think some boundaries are very, very healthy. And I know certain people here have even ended friendships recently because those friendships didn't serve you anymore. That's a terrifying thing to do when you love somebody so much, but it's not a healthy relationship for you. Yeah. So I throw that out there. Jump on in, Eva, or somebody, take it from there.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend of mine that we've been friends since we were 7 years old. I had a very similar fluid childhood, and I just have to say, I don't think I think boundaries are such an interesting topic, because we're taught from birth that we shouldn't have boundaries. As children, we're taught that our caregivers, even if they're shit caregivers, but our parents are the end all be all. They're the word of God. That is the boundary. They set the boundaries. They tell you what the boundaries are. They tell you what you're allowed to feel. They tell you when you're not allowed to feel. They tell you to buck up, whatever it is, like they set the boundaries for your life. And we're literally taught until we're sent out into the world, boundaryless, that their boundaries are our boundaries. And so whatever we innately or inherently have in our hearts as that doesn't feel good, none of that feels comfortable to me. You're taught, no, this is for the best. You don't know, you're too young, this is for the best. And so you start to think, I don't even trust my intuition anymore, because I guess that's clearly for the best. And that's in every single family in the entire world. I mean, to an extent, you know what I mean? I'm sure of course there are healthier families, but even so, as a parent, we set the boundaries. Now, whether that, feels good to the child or not, we're trying to keep them in check. And so we go out into the world trying to figure out now what the boundaries are. And my girlfriend that I met when I was 7, she just fit right into that familial mold with my family. Like my emotions were just going to be bullied right out of me. Like if I had a feeling, well, that didn't really count. And I let other people lead the way because clearly they knew what was better for me than I did. And now all these years later, 40, almost 50 years later, right before the COVID lockdown, it just started to get more and more and more toxic. And I started to realize this is just not where I am in my life anymore. I love her to pieces. I understand her. That's the other thing too. I think when we grow up in a really toxic environment and a boundaryless environment, we are really taught to placate our caregivers' emotions. Like it's all about understanding where they are. We're head on a swivel, right? We're always
so true.
Yeah, we're always looking like, ooh, the mood is bad. I'll be the entertainer. That's why I grew up to be an entertainer. Like if I just do this tap dance over here, the rest of the world won't see what's going on behind me back here. But more than that, I've got to caretake everybody's emotions around me because that's the only way I can control my environment.
But I will say, I just wanted to chime in because having come from that kind of family, I feel like, the problem with boundaries is that children need them.
Yeah.
They desperately need them.
And that's the weird balance.
When they do not have them, it creates a sense of anxiety. Yes. Because like Lori was saying, all we want is our mommies, all we want is the love of our daddies, and we assume that it's a very, very primal need in us. Yeah. And when we are not given the safety of limits and boundaries, that's when, there's
chaos,
issues with anxiety, mental illness,
well, I can even
depression,
drugs, all the things.
Right. And I can take it a step further because when my husband and I were getting together, he picked up this book by Malcolm Gladwell, and because I wanted it for my birthday. Called Outliers, and he read it halfway through.
I read that book.
Great book.
And when he came to me, he said, I know who you are now. And I was like, oh, and he was explaining it because when I was growing up, not only were there no boundaries in our house, my mother used to weaponize my father against us. So if we had so much anticipatory anxiety that if we heard the garage door open, my mother would say, I'm telling daddy. And then she would tell him something that happened, and you would just pray that it wasn't the thing that you did. So instead of my siblings becoming brothers in arms, we all became like, listen, wait. All right, thank God it's not me. And then run. So forget about having boundaries. You literally were like, you just never knew what was going to happen. So I would get triggered every time I heard a garage door, and, to unlearn those things, it's a lifetime. So,
can I chime in too, Elizabeth? Just really quick, coming from just another different background, just coming from, for me, it was like very much breaking generational vicious cycles because I grew up in a Latino, I'm first generation here, and in our culture, and I'm not sure, this is what we experience in our culture. There are so many, you're constantly being told what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to take care of your family no matter what. Like when I tell you the guilt that till this day, my parents give me, that it's so American that, they're not living with me and I'm not taking care of them. Or, that I'm supposed to put up with my sister who is so rude to me, so mean to me, so passive aggressive, honestly makes me uncomfortable and gives me anxiety every time the phone rings and it's her number, but I'm supposed to just put up with all of that. And for me, just talking about boundaries and figuring that stuff out, especially with family and figuring out, I realized even though it's your family, that doesn't mean they have the right to dictate whether your happiness, your unhappiness, your success. And for me, my mom was always constantly, I grew up in the same kind of household as you guys. My mom was always about, looking amazing, looking perfect. And my dad was always cheating. He was like the head of the network. They both came from Cuba and Venezuela. My mom hated him, was always crying, was always, chasing after him, but was still cutting his meat and still doing things like the typical, you know what I mean? Like the cultural things that I would be like, Mom, what are you doing? And I just was like, I kept watching, you keep kind of following along until one day I literally was like, I'm done. I was like, I was not put on this earth to just literally be a subordinate to my entire family. I'm allowed to be happy too. I'm supposed to be happy too. And what does that look like for me? You know what I mean? Taking that
Yeah.
power back.
That's why I started
And
with the
finding that balance, like
Right.
you said, that's where the boundaries and the balance, I think, come into play, because it's exactly like what you were just talking about with like a healthy parenting would be, you have to set the boundaries, because without the boundaries, like you said, there's chaos. But the boundaries have to be healthy boundaries where you teach the child, yes, your feelings matter, but here's the rules of the
Right.
house right now, but what you think and feel still matter, but this is what we're doing. It took like, God, until my 40s and a whole shit
Literally.
ton of therapy to start to realize I don't need to be run by guilt. And I really define myself. I mean, I think our lives are defined by what we say no to, not what we say yes to.
Having a
So when
voice.
you start to
But then-
really,
Yeah, but then it's interesting sort of tagging that into like the COVID question, and then where Lori started the conversation is just to thread together that we live our lives in chapters. You know, sometimes we have to be stronger, sometimes we have to be softer, sometimes we have to bend, sometimes we have to say, make an end to something, you know, and with time on our hands, which hopefully, you know, we give ourselves, and sometimes it's forced upon us, like in this pandemic, we have time to reflect. And then we can make stronger choices based on our mental health. So there have been times when each of us have had to be stronger and say no and find our voice, because we may have not had one, or we were told that our voice didn't matter. And then we have to soften in the wind again and sort of change our directive with our boundaries. So that leads me to balance, because you know, I think finding freedom in your marriages or some time alone, like what are some of your takeaways in being able to have the balance at the time to yourself to be able to know how to pivot, you know, with a topic like boundaries or what have you?
It's interesting.
Yes.
I just had this conversation with one of my twins that, you know, he said something about his father getting, you know, my husband getting up and working all day and blah blah and doesn't stop, and you know, and my whole an issue, you know, that I have because it's trickled down from his parents, is that it is not commendable to be worn down until you have nothing left. It is not respectable to treat yourself like crap, you know, and not exercise and not meditate and not, you know, have any self-care. That is not, you know, something that I admire. I admire those with balance. I
Yeah.
admire those who can create a world for themselves, or the architects of their own life, who can say, this is when I'm stopping today and I need to take a walk.
Well,
Or
that's
I
why
need to meditate.
I
think
love that about
what-
this generation, because that's what they bring. They always get the bad rap for being the lazy generation that doesn't want to work and doesn't want to do anything. But I think what they're bringing is the pendulum back to the other side, which is, no, it's not okay to be a workaholic and have no life and have not be a good parent because you're not, you know, available, and you're not even available to yourself to be able to give anything to anybody else. And then you're just angry and resentful, and you're not caretaking your own needs. But I like that this, you know, lazy generation, which I don't think that they are. I think they're just given kind of the bad rap, but they're swinging back with the self-care, which is really
I just want to chime in
Well,
too, you guys,
also
about
they're just so just throw that back to Caroline for a second, because I know you're going to say something, but it was also like what you just said about them, Eva. I think also we could say about them in regards to, like, they have a no bullshit policy too. Like, they're unapologetically truthful. They're not seeking to live in a paradigm, a familial paradigm, like of the way it used to be, you know, sexually, gender wise, what have you. And, you know, I just feel that, you know, maybe they were raised by us, but their entire, you know, unique sort of generation that I've never seen before, which is they're not trying to live by within the old structure in the way that we still were sort of figuring out for ourselves as we were trying to like throw it off.
break through.
They're not seeking approval. They're seeking acceptance.
Yeah.
And that's something that I deal with my children, where they're all 18 and above now. And I say to them, look, we can't tell you what to do. We can only advise you. But when they get frustrated with either their birth mom or with their father, I'm like, well, what's bothering you? Do you want acceptance or do you want approval? Because approval, you're not going to get all the time, but acceptance you can demand. and you can say,
Right.
this is what I'm doing, you know?
Right.
I mean,
And I just want to, yeah, go
okay.
ahead. Sorry,
Yes.
Lori, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I have a staff. So, you know, for me, the way I was able to achieve balance is to realize that as I was waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning when I started my company and making notes and sending emails and then going back to sleep, it was ridiculous. So finally I was like, okay, well, I can't do this to my staff. I can't keep doing it to myself. My father died young, being a workaholic of a heart attack. I'm like, all right, I have to learn something. So I made very strict hours. I'm like, don't respond to emails after 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Don't respond to me if I break that rule. I'm not expecting that. And also from the clients, you have to fill the vessel. You've got some. If I take everything all day and then I expect you to come back, there'll be nothing left tomorrow. And when it comes to my husband, you know, we have 2 boys and 2 girls, and getting a voice in that group when we're all together is hard. But I always say to my husband, you know, because he doesn't stop moving. There's always something to do. There's gardening or this or that, or, you know, and I'm like, you've got to slow down. You've got to figure out how to spend time with each of the children alone. So there are times in which I'd love to be there. My husband took our youngest up to her first apartment. Would I have loved to have been there? Yes. But he said to me, do you mind if I go alone? And I said, no, I encourage it, because then they get one-on-one time together and they get to have that. And I think that that's, you know, super important.
No,
You know,
it's,
I mean, I
it's
really
true,
support
but
that.
the thing is that sometimes, and I want to go to Caroline, but I just want to say, like, sometimes we have a hard time demanding freedom for ourselves or allowing freedom with those that we love, because it all goes back to fear of not being loved and worthy of love. And so it's like how you have to wrestle around in that in order to finally arrive to a place where you aren't in these codependent relationships. But Caroline, you were going to
Sorry,
say.
yeah, I was just going to say, just from like coming from a mom standpoint, like truthfully, because I, you know, started 3 years, you know, almost 4 years ago, and I really was a stay-at-home mom. You know, I was kind of told my whole life, you know, you look pretty, you get married, you're taken care of, and you're a mom. And it was basically like, okay, so what happens after the kids leave? I was like, do I just stare at a white wall and die? Like, I was literally like, oh, do I just stare at my husband and like wait for him to like entertain me? And I started to realize, I was like, wait, what's going to happen to me? And I realized I had spent my entire life following along what I was being told was what I was supposed to do. And I realized, no, I am not here to just take care of the kids, just take care of my husband, take care of everybody. I realized I needed to find balance where I got to live out my dreams too. I realized I needed to figure out how I could humble myself, because I feel like as a mom and sometimes as a woman, you know, we take it all on. We do. Everything falls on our shoulders. We end up managing it all. You know, we're doing school, we're doing play dates, we're doing, you know, your own job, your husband's work, the house, the kids, and we're doing so many things. We forget to ask for help, and we forget to humble ourselves and say, you know what, we cannot do it all. If you do have some dreams of your own, no, you can't. Like you said, Lori, keep you up. It's 2 a.m, 5 a.m. workout, do this, do that, have time for yourself, have time for your husband, have time for your kids. There is a point that to me, balance was asking for help, was really humbling myself and saying, you know what, I deserve to be happy too. And I always say too, because I make sure my kids are happy. I make sure my husband's happy. I really make sure my elderly parents are happy, because they're the hardest of the group. And literally, what am I left with? And I realized I'm supposed to be happy too. And what does that take? How can I do it? I need help. And I realized I had
I
to talk to my
absolutely
husband.
agree with that.
Isn't there
I
a piece
mean,
of the
it's so
puzzle that we're
interesting. It's
missing
when,
though?
I
Isn't
mean,
there a
with,
piece
I
of the
with
also
my
puzzle?
think that that's
husband,
one of those things that's trained too, because from childhood, where you fit in the family dynamic is we receive love by being the responsible one, the caregiver one, the good girl, the whatever it is. That's how you receive love, and that's how we understand receiving love. So we go forward being the good girl, the responsible girl, the one who will take all the guilt on the shoulders, like, and
It's
then
like
when
what
you
is expected
try
of you.
to extricate yourself from that, you start to feel like, oh my God, maybe I won't be loved. Maybe I don't fit in this family dynamic anymore. And that's a very scary thing, because it harkens all the way back to when you're a child and you would die without that care. So if you're not being the good girl or the, you know, the complete, you know, the one who does everything right and is the most responsible, who will love you and how will you fit in? Like,
Oh,
how
And
will
it's
and
a
I
hard,
think
it is a hard
also,
conversation. It is a hard conversation to have
I think
with
that
your husband. Yeah.
birth order is also, Eva, just to piggyback on what you were saying, birth order is really crucial, because as the eldest of 4, even when I was little, I was the eldest, even if I
Same.
was 5, right? And
Yeah.
so I was going to be okay. I went off to college. I was lonely. when I get up, no, she's okay. If my sister went, and snuck around with my boyfriend, it's okay. You'll find someone else.
What?
Oh yeah. But because I'm the eldest, I'm a big girl. So now when my husband says, when I pack everyone up and I have snacks and sandwiches and we're in the car on a road trip, he's like, you are fucking Wonder Woman. I don't want to be Wonder Woman. I want to
Well,
go.
okay, hold on. Are you
sick of
sure?
being Wonder
Can
Woman.
can we just talk about that for a second? Because
I'll
we're
get
all
on the
the
couch when we
Bella,
get to New York City,
right.
Lord.
So we're all the Ballabusta, right? Which is an expression that
Right.
means like you're the Wonder
Yes.
Woman, right?
Right.
But there's a piece of me that's also like, I'm not a martyr. I want to be the Wonder Woman. I am so type A OCD. I'm like, no. You don't need, I don't know what to,
I was just gonna say the same thing listening to this. Yeah.
We're at so the kids are like, they come in and they're like, can I help you? And they know I'm going to say no. And I'm like, no, that's okay. I mean, except for setting the table, go set the table, but you're not cutting the tomatoes the way I want you to cut the tomatoes for my special salad. So just don't do the tomatoes. I'm good. So,
and then they give up, and then they give up, and then you're left to do it all.
Right. So then I try, and then when I had to learn to say like, do you want to come in here and learn how to like get the meat out of the lobster tail? There's, and I'm trying in vain. At some point,
well, they also like my daughter also admitted to me a couple of weeks ago. She's like, Mom, whenever you ask me to do something, she said, I know if I do it wrong, I'll only have to do it for about 30 seconds before you jump in and you're like, no, I got it. I can do it faster. I'll figure it out. But she goes, but I've always done it on purpose. So I don't have to do it. I'm like, thanks for that little piece of information. Now I'm going to learn to stand back and let you F it up. So while I have a twitch in the background because I'm like, I can do it faster, better. I'm gonna have to do it again.
But you're right. It's giving that power.
I have a question with such incredible, brilliant, successful women. Just a few questions for you guys, just as far as technique and tips and like, would you say that you are people in general who take a moment before you speak and react to things? So that was there a moment when you used to just constantly react to everything and then you evolved into somebody who was like, let me think before I speak. I want to be careful on, I'm just curious because there is that in regards to boundaries and balance, sort of having the grace of not just being a reactive person kind of feels intrinsically like tied up and braided in that. Is that something each of you had to work on, Kara? Is that something, not being reactive right off the?
Yes, I come from a family where we had a lot of trauma. My father took his life when I was 25 and my youngest brother, my youngest sibling was 13 and he was there. So there's a lot of trauma. So with trauma comes this like open wound, reactive vibe in the family system, and the homeostasis is that. And I, for many years after that, was very reactive, never thought, just did it. And I realized it's not healthy. It's just not, that's the sign of a broken person. It's someone who cannot they don't want to digest what has gone on.
You want to get ahead of the trauma. So you're
correct.
I'm assuming trying to constantly
to protect. Yeah. And I see that now in my sisters. I have two sisters and a brother. I see that in my sisters, that they're extremely reactive. And now it makes me sad because it's such a sign of
pain,
uncured rage,
pain,
fear, correct,
despondency, loneliness,
exactly.
On this topic, I'm just curious if I'm the only one who does this, but I teach this to our female interns, and I say female very specifically. And I said this to someone who I was having lunch with the other day, a business associate, said like, how did you build your business? Someone I'd gone to high school with, and now we're doing business together just by happenstance. And I said, well, one of the things I had to learn to do was speak last in a meeting, because as a woman, often I was just, no one cared and they weren't asking me anything. And I had to learn that I shouldn't be breaking into the meeting. I will actually serve myself better if I wait until everyone has something to say, and then I can hear everything. And then if my idea comes, it has a place, then say it. But that you have so much more power in waiting until the end of the meeting to hear everything else. And then, you know, at some point you can also kind of chime in at the end and devastate and leave. But I wonder if you guys have felt that, because you're pitching, and I know that, you know, and it's hard
I
to have a
never
voice as
wait.
an actress. You're right. But I mean, imagine if you did, and then
Listen,
you
I
heard
pitch
it
all the time. That's really interesting. And I
Mhm.
really want to think about that.
Yeah.
It
Liz
wasn't
and
an
I
easy,
pitch
yeah,
all
it's
the
not an easy
time.
thing to do. I
It's
was
not.
very frustrated because I was often the only woman in a room or a conference call filled with men. And I would listen to, forgive the expression, the pissing contest. And I'd be like,
Right.
well. And then at the end, if they were like, okay, no one would ask for me for
Well,
any
here's
information.
Here's
And
something
then
that-
I would say, by the way, has anyone thought about blah, 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 blah? Okay, thanks. And we're done.
Well, you know what? I love that dynamic too, because what you're really doing with men I you know, for all the men that might be listening, you know, we as women have a daddy dynamic, but conversely, there's the mommy dynamic. And if you kind of let the boys all do their boy thing, and then you come in with the mom advice at the end, you're much more apt to be listened to and understood, because they've already gotten it all out. And now
Right.
they're willing to actually listen to the female advice,
Mhm.
because we do, like, you know, what was said earlier, there's the, you know, do you want to be understood? Do you want to be
Accepted.
listened to and accepted and understood? Or do you want to, you know,
The approval, right? Is approval.
do you want
versus
the
acceptance.
approval or
Yeah.
the acceptance? Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
that
I think
speaking
also
last is I
and
mean, I
they're
don't know.
looking for the approval
Yes,
of each other and then of the mommy,
and we're
just
looking
like
for
we
See, I
do.
don't, I have to
Just like
say,
we do of a dad,
Yes.
of a dad figure.
I
you know
have
what
to
mean?
say, I don't do that. I feel like when I get into a meeting, I speak when I want to speak. I do not wait. When I have an idea, you know, I feel like, because I want to model what a female baller is. And that's like kind of my MO in a room. And I don't want to have to wait till everyone has stopped speaking so that I have the floor.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
I'm not saying wait till you have the floor. I do it consciously because I want to hear what everyone else has to say. And I also think sometimes I get heard more if
I was
I
going to say,
wait
you have the
versus if I
mic drop
chime
at the
in.
end and their
Yes.
full attention,
guys
because they've
hear
already
me?
gotten.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to say too, you guys, with just even like bringing it out of a meeting room and just even into your home and into your family life, like there's something about being able to, you know, I'm Latino. We react. My mom was a screamer. My mom was a
Same.
yeller, like for real. I mean, it was like, oh my God, like she looked like the Hulk, like her whole shirt would rip off if she was pissed. I mean, you were kind of like, holy shit, you know, it's scary. And you kind of like realize there was so much fear in that, you know what I mean? And like, there is something about
That's
waiting and listening, and just you get so much more out of somebody. Like I realized with John, I realized I did react. I'm Latino. It was what I watched. It's what I imitated. I do react. If I'm pissed, my voice goes up. I'm using my hands. I'm like a crazy person. And I realized you do have to actively try to sit, like Lori said, to actively try to be quiet and listen, because you do get more out of being calm than you do out of yelling and screaming at somebody.
Well,
You do.
And the problem with reacting, I have found, you know, is that you end up having a lot of, you know, we're all talking about trauma and anxiety and stress in childhood. Like, how about not making so many messes in your life that you constantly have to clean them up? So just taking a moment to step back, like we started talking about in the beginning, the balance, the separation from things. It's like, I love this quote, being in the world, but not of it. You know, can we physically embody that? Like being in the world, but not of it, being able to step back from it. You know, hopefully it does give us some more balance in our lives. And also, you know, sort of having some perspective, you can understand more of what's motivating you, you know, and making you, you know, because it's important. We were talking about a lot in this hour about the importance of having a voice, you know, and expressing it and having boundaries like a motherfucker. I have no regrets about having certain boundaries and saying, hey, no, don't treat me like that.
Mhm.
Because it took me a very
Absolutely.
long time to be able to have a voice. And I'm not giving it up anytime soon. But at the same time, like Lori started the conversation, wanting to soften into learning how to be capable of intimacy. And then And then what we've also talked about is unpacking how to be intimate and gentle with ourselves. Are each of you very hard on yourselves? I mean, would you say
Oh,
classically? Yes.
Absolutely.
Hard. I feel
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
my worst enemy. You know, I'm so hard on myself, and I have to be very careful, and I have to step back, because when I'm really hard on myself, I have very little room for letting other people, mess up. You know, I hold other people to a standard that I hold myself to, and it's not fair. And I really have to work on just more grace, less judgmental mentality. Like, just more
Yeah.
grace, less judgmental. Like
I
know.
used to not want to, I wouldn't want to have any input from my clients. I'd be like, no, the event's over. It was perfect. And then I had to learn, like, no, maybe I should go back and say, how did everything go? What can we work on? You know, I had to learn how to apologize while I would like, and knowing that apologizing for something you did wrong, it does not condition you to being weak. It just means that you're taking accountability and responsibility. And one
Right.
of the things, and then
That's a
I
great
think I've-
point. Yeah.
Thank you. And one of the things I think is important that speaking of screaming, because my father was a horrible screamer. My mother would entice him to, you know, I was so petrified of my parents, and I thought everyone was. And when I joined this family, my youngest, at one point we were having an argument, and she said to me, and I mean, she was 13 years old, and she said, when you yell, I can't hear you. And I went, oh. And
Wow.
I never yelled at her again. I never yelled at any of the kids again. And I realized, like, oh, I don't want to be like my dad. But then I started consciously listening to what they would say. And I wanted to become the kind of stepmom where they would come to me and they would say something and I would pivot. So when I tell you I never yelled again, I mean, never. And, you know, that's something that's the frustration sometimes that I get into with my husband, where I say, you know, I've said something to you and you don't seem to be pivoting, but if you say something to me, I immediately change. Like, he doesn't like when I use the F word, because I really like using the F word.
Me too.
I
Me
love
too.
it.
I love
I
it.
know I do. And but now he's not trying to censor me, but amazingly, he says this to me now that our youngest is 20 and I joined the family when she was like 9. I'm like, I used to drop the F word around the kids all the time. He's like, yeah, but I felt like, you know what you were doing. He's like, but now that we're alone, it's just you and me. And if I say, like, if he says something, I'll say, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you effing killing? Can we curse? Sorry. Are you
Yes, you
effing kidding me?
curse.
And I realize, I'm like,
I
oh,
know. It's
maybe
like,
when you say to someone, are you effing kidding me? Maybe I could say it differently. So, you know, I've had to learn to pivot and apologize and know that those are things that don't
But
make
that-
you weak. They make you strong.
But that's
It's
a
also
really good point in regards to the topic of balance, because you can't have intimacy, you can't have friendships, you can't have success if you can't be a leader, you can't have love in your life if you can't listen and make changes, you know, and you got to be able to step back a little bit and hear people. You asked an interesting question, Lori. You said something like, well, you know, something about listening and actors and this and that, and there's 3 actors here. But I would just say nothing is less interesting when you're watching an actor prepare for their next line. The only actor that's interesting is the actor that listens
Exactly.
and discovers what they're going to say. And that's the thing about, you know, sort of tying all this up in a nice bow, because we're pretty much done with this talk, but it's like we come from histories of trauma that make us incredibly strong to go out there and slay all the dragons. And having boundaries and working on our boundaries throughout our lifetime it's a lifelong thing. But at the same time, we have to be able to change if we have to focus on something else in our life or find balance in other ways. And I think that, to me, is always the most humbling thing, which is like, oh, that you know, what worked for me last week isn't working for me this week. And I better start listening and paying better attention, you know,
and pivoting and
Because-
changing. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because at the end
Constant.
of the day, this journey is our chance, right? And if we're not going to grow, then
And you
what
only
the
get one.
fuck?
People
Yeah.
forget. You know, that's
Right.
my
Yeah.
favorite quote is like your second, you know, your
Yeah.
life really begins
Yeah.
when you realize you only have
Yeah.
one. And nothing has ever been more eye-opening or aware, you
Yeah.
know, like I turned 50 and I have never wanted to live my best life more. I've never wanted to just be happy more. I've never wanted to just feel good in my own skin more. And it's like that feeling of shit, it's almost over. Like we're at the second half
Yeah.
and you do right now. I feel more life in me than I ever did
Yeah.
at 20 and 30. Cause now I see the end. I see the problems. I see how hard everything is, that you just appreciate it so much more and you want to live it to the fullest. So I feel like that's something that's really created the boundaries, is me wanting to really live my best life. And I think we all deserve that.
Yeah, I have found there's this quote from, I'm going to quote it wrong, so forgive me, but there's this quote in the Bible, which is forgive them for they know not what they do. And that has served me a lot, because I realize that what's coming at me, I'm taking it in differently than someone sending it to me. And I realize that, again, I get so triggered by interruptions. And although I've interrupted you guys, I'm sorry about that. But I realized that, okay, well, that's about this person so desperately wanting something, either to make me feel like they know what I'm going to say next or something like that. And it's really not about shutting me up. So I try to, look at situations that way.
Absolutely.
It's everybody trying to have their feelings heard, their feelings heard and feel like they're seen. Everybody just wants to feel seen and wants to feel
Seen, heard, loved, and respected. Honestly, right? It's like those four things. That's it. So
and we're
simple.
all trying to find the kindest way to do that. And we've spent a lifetime like saying, I need to be heard and respected. And now at this age, I'm starting to pull that back and say, I don't have to scream to be heard and respected. And I don't have to act like a man to be heard with men, because that's not necessarily, they'll come back as a man. I just really have to find my feminine power and be able to say succinctly and, with the utmost brevity what I need to say, because we'll speak on and on and on, but guys don't always want to listen to all the details that we love, that we, we live for.
It's also like, you don't want to beg for it anymore, right? It's like, you don't want to beg for the attention or the praise. It's like, now at 50, I'm kind of like, I'm good. All that matters is that I like what I see in the mirror. That's it. I just need to like what I'm doing, who I am, and my family. You know what I mean? I realize I don't care about anybody else's approval. I don't care. It's like, this is my one chance and I got to do what's best for me. And that's really what creates that, I think, that confidence and that motivation to just be like, you know what? That doesn't serve a purpose. That doesn't serve a purpose. Like, I mean, I cut out my mom, my sister at one point.
So I was
I have to really believe that's what's important to me too, is that I have to constantly work on that inner insecure voice that says, oh, but is that right? Is that good enough? Was that an intelligent enough way at the problem? Let me ask everybody. Let me put, what did you think of that? No, I don't need to ask what y'all think of that. I don't. But my whole life I've been going, how was that? What did you think of that? No, because guess what? Men don't ask that. There was a whole study that was done for men in business. And when men will get up and give a whole presentation, they just say, and that's the presentation. When a woman gets up to give the presentation, she would always at the end say, are there any questions? Does anybody have any ideas they want to throw out there? What does everybody think of that? Women will ask what you think of that, and men don't care what you think of it.
We're going to wrap up in a second, and generally we do respond to a few questions, but I was thinking about how to ask you guys this in a roundup kind of way, because what are the takeaways? If you could give a golden nugget of wisdom to others, to help them. But I love the way this person said, essentially, what do you do that unfucks your mind? And how do you unlearn your programming? How do you unlearn your programming that creates illness rather than wellness? And it's sometimes you're tough, sometimes you have to soften, how do you find that balance, and how do you find time to yourself to be able to hear, what it is that's happening to you in such busy and robust lives like you guys each have?
Well, I think first of all, boundaries, the definition of boundaries is finding the limits that, respect who you are, right? So when you find out that this is what you will tolerate, this is what you will not tolerate, when you find that self-love, that's when you start to unfuck your mind. When you start to own who you are and love who you are, so that person will never be able to hurt you, or that person will never be able to, intrude on your privacy or disrespect you at work or whatever it is. That is how you do it, is by finding those boundaries, because you've just found love for yourself.
And so, and for me too, you guys, just also for that question, how do you unfuck your mind? I think for me, genuinely, it really was, and I talk about happy tools all the time, because it's just about, those little things, whether it's a quote, whether it's a book, whether it's an action, whether it's an activity or a person that just makes you feel good. Something is simple. I always take keep it really simple, because I think once you accomplish something, even the smallest of goals, you do feel a little bit of motivation. You do feel that little pep in your step. You do feel like you're getting your power back when you feel like you've accomplished something. And for me, it's like something as simple as 10 minutes of gratefulness, like taking that time to do simple things that that friend that makes you laugh, or that hike that you always loved. Or I remember being like, I love tennis. Why did I stop playing tennis? Like, when did I stop doing the things that I love? Like, I'm running around taking the kids to every activity, but like I yet don't do anything for myself. And that to me, what started to unfuck my mind was doing small little tasks, small little things every day, just committing to 10 minutes, 30 minutes a day, something that was just for me. Like you said, self-care that didn't have to make sense to anybody else. For me, it's getting up and getting dressed, putting my makeup on. Like, that always puts me in a great mood. It puts a pep in my step. I put my music on. That to me is self-care. I tell my husband, I need those 30 minutes. You've got to take care of the kids. You've got to help. I did not have kids so that, we didn't get married so that you don't do anything. We got married so that we both share in the responsibility, so that we both live out our dreams. And so it was me, those little tiny steps, those little daily, that all of a sudden it was like, now you have 30 minutes to yourself. All of a sudden you had an hour to yourself. Your mood starts to get better. You start to feel better. You're doing things that you love, that fulfill you. And for whatever reason, it's just puts you in a good mood.
I think that's really, really, I think you hit the nail on the head, which was, obviously one thing I wanted to ask you guys were your thoughts on success, but it's like, Caroline, I think you've really said it so right, which is like, time is ticking, like the clock is ticking. The grains of sand are dropping out. Like, I want to live my best life and not have the impediments of my pathology constantly tripping me up in my journey. And somebody here, Annie Anderson, asked a question about, getting rid of abusive relationships and how do you do it? But I'm sure you guys would sort of answer it in a similarly concise way, which is to say, I think you finally get to a place in your life where you don't want to be living in the drama. You don't want to have relationships that thrive on drama or work dynamics that thrive on drama. You want to remove that from your life.
100%.
But I think I think you're right, but I think it's hard. Unlearning everything that you've been taught your whole life. I've done it, and it's extremely difficult. And
it takes time too, right, Lori?
That's the real dedication. Like, I think that the real self-care for me comes in my dedication to my work with my therapist. I mean, otherwise I don't know if I would have ever been able to get past the impediments of my pathology. Like, I think I would have always been tripped up by looking for the drama if I didn't have the drama, because that's what I was comfortable with, creating it, but I didn't have it.
Feeling in your chest. That was the norm for me, to feel that. And so I would create that and unlearn
anxiety.
Because I hate to sound super cliche, but my inner 5-year-old was traumatized. Like, at 55 was still traumatized. And if I didn't start to go in and do meditative, interactive 5-year-old loving care on that reparenting that child, I don't know if I would have ever been able to really find peace and real pivotal change.
This is exactly what I'm doing with my shrink right now.
Yeah. And that commitment to that work with yourself is the most important care I could possibly.
That's the ticket. That's the ticket.
Agreed.
It's the commitment to yourself.
Care period.
Well,
is unwinding all of that trauma.
I saw someone ask the question, how do you find time for yourself? And you don't have to find 30 minutes. And even if you find 10, if you find time to just go and lock yourself in the bathroom and take a bath, or if you don't, or take a shower, or just find choosing yourself, even for 5 or 10 minutes, already is a step towards more time. So, 100%. I know it's difficult to commit to meditation, or how about getting up and making your bed every day? I know that I will tell you, walking in and out of your bedroom, when your bed is made, it changes something in your head.
The simplest of tasks.
Yes.
Simplest of
It's not
tasks makes
depressing.
you feel good.
It's not calling you back to bed. It's showing
not
you
one more mess in your life.
You've accomplished one thing. I mean, during COVID, all I would do is get up, make the bed, and open the curtains. And my husband's like, "Are you doing anything?" I'm like, I opened the curtains.
I would make the bed and I would fully get dressed in makeup, because I was like, you know what? This makes me feel normal. It makes me feel happy. It's like doing the little little things that make you feel good.
I have a producing partner and a friend who calls me Crystal Carrington, because she's like, "Where the fuck are you going?"
I'm like in sparkle pants.
Fully made up. You got the makeup and the hair and the shoes and the things. Like, where the fuck are you going? I said, "It's for me."
Yeah,
it's for me. It makes me happy.
By the way, that's really smart for people watching who don't have a lot of time. If you have enough time to wash your face, put on some mascara and some lipstick, that's self-care. You choosing you.
Yes, that's
Absolutely.
self-care.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. As Karl
Anything.
Lagerfeld said, if you're going to wear sweatpants, it means you've given up.
Wow.
Well,
Oh,
guys,
Carl.
It has its
I
place too.
digress. I digress.
They have their place too.
I mean, I have sparkly.
I promised you
sweatpants.
guys I would only take an hour of your time. I mean, I think it's we're at that place. But anyway, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
Chris,
so
Carrington,
much,
I love
Liz.
you so
Thank you,
much.
guys.
Caroline, Eva,
Love you.
Chloe, I love you guys. Thank
Love
you for
you.
coming. Oh, and Meryl Posters here saying, Caroline, I watch your Insta stories and your message really resonates. Anyway, so
That
Wow.
means so
here-
much. Thank you,
She's a
guys. That means so
powerhouse,
Thank you
much.
so
Meryl
much. This
Poster.
felt
Thank
like
you.
self-care. So thank you.
Agreed.
This is
was
amazing.
so fun.
Yeah.
Love
We should
you
do this
all.
group again.
I will
Great.
say,
Yes.
I do the Respect Project because it's what fills my cup, and I appreciate everybody coming and
Awesome.
sharing.
It was so, I'm so
Thank you
grateful
so,
for this
so
invitation.
much.
Ladies,
My
it's
heart is
such
full.
an honor.
Yeah.
So
Same.
nice
Love
to
you
meet
all.
you, ladies.
All right,
Happy
Carol. See you
Sunday.
soon.